Hello, and welcome back to another edition of Hobby News Daily. I'm still Danny, and I'm joined by Mike Moynihan. What's going on, Mike?
Hey, Danny, how are you, man?
I am good. I've got my Baltimore accent on tonight. When I hear your clean Texas pronunciation, and I feel like I'm on the wire.
It's called education. It's really
Yeah.
great. You should try it, or
Baltimore,
at
the
least
city of free ads.
or at least for your kids, get them educated.
They are far more than I was.
Yeah,
Um, So, first of all, thank you for joining me. Thank you for taking time out of your evening. For those of you who don't know, we don't do this all day, every day. So, we work around schedules, and I appreciate it. Want to talk some vintage, want to talk some content creation, want to talk some hobby, and want to pick your brain. So, does that sound good?
pick away.
All right. Let's start with some fun stuff. First set you remember collecting.
First set I remember collecting 83 tops.
Oh, good set.
Are you taking notes? I like it.
I do. I write it down in case I need to reference it later.
I like it.
Some of us take this seriously.
Yeah, I
Um,
love.
Okay. What was the first card that you had that you still have?
Oh my gosh, I have cards from '81 that I still have that when I first started, uh, in boxes and
Original.
for sure, 100%.
That's all. That's very cool.
I remember the first vintage card I ever got that I considered vintage. When you're young, your perspective is different. So to me, a 79 tops card in 1981 is like, that's super old. That's like crazy old. Little did I know I was just, again, a matter of perspective. My first real vintage card I remember buying was a 1960 tops Carl Yastrzemski
Okay.
rookie. I still have it. It's over there. And
Why that card?
the PSA 3. And I sent it in to get graded just to encapsulate it and protect it. Not because I cared what the grade was, but
Yeah, that's cool. Um, if you were to take a vintage set and re-release it today, what year would you re-release? And I know they do the heritage, and I know they do the throwback, but if you were, what set would you like to see brought back?
um, on, this may sound like a cliche answer, but 52 tops.
Really?
Just, and it's not even my favorite set. In fact, it's pretty far down the list. But you asked if they could re-release a set, that would be it, because that's the one that really launched Tops into being who Tops was, and it's a iconic set, regardless of what I particularly personally think of the design, which isn't that great. I mean, it's okay. I like it. It's just not my favorite.
My theory is the 52 tops, specifically the mantle, is like the Jerry West logo for the NBA. It's not the greatest player ever, but everybody just acknowledges kind of the logo for the hobby.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's eras of who, like, if you think about an era, you think about a certain place. So if you think about that vintage era, that golden age era, 50s and 60s, you think Mantle's the GOAT of that era. I think from the 70s through the 80s, honestly, in terms of hobby GOAT, it's Nolan Ryan,
Yeah.
in my opinion. Uh, and then you get, there's not many GOATs in today's hobby. You could say Trout was one for a while in the super modern era, certainly, 2010 and beyond.
Otani.
Otani maybe now. I'm trying to think 90s. Who was it? It was,
I mean, it was Ripken to Jeter,
yeah.
and I think Jeter's overrated, so I don't really count him. But that would be the answer.
But there was times McGuire was the GOAT, I mean, you just couldn't have enough McGuire cards in the late 90s. Then Barry Bonds, it's just it shifts a lot faster now, I guess. You know what I mean? You could literally go year by year and say who was the hobby GOAT for that year, whereas for the entire 50s and 60s, 2 decades, you can say it's Mantle and it's not even close. That's unusual.
Do you think that's just in the hobby, or do you think on the field? How different was the on the field rankings for you?
Oh, only in the hobby. Mantle, great player, no question, and just where he played, how good they were. There's a lot of things that contributed to Mantle being as beloved by people that buy sports cards, right?
Yep.
And that's kind of all that matters in terms of hobby greatness. Where he was from, his story, his struggles, his injury, all of it played a part in him being beloved. Taking over a mantle for DiMaggio, this just couldn't write this stuff even if you wanted to. No one would believe you.
All right, he looks like Robert Redford right out of the farm in Oklahoma.
Yeah.
And historically, cards were made in New York. They were printed in New York. And that was really the epicenter of the card world in the 50s and 60s.
And the baseball world, which is why it made sense.
Absolutely. Before Western expansion and everything else. So, and it actually, that times up almost exactly with the end of his career. And so that's interesting. Did going west change baseball cards?
Sure. I think there's two things in that era that changed baseball cards because it changed the way we viewed baseball, and that was the Western expansion starting in '58 with the Dodgers and Giants moving out of New York, and then you had expanded playoffs. You had divisions, right? In 60, what's it, 69?
69
was the first year of breaking it up and having more teams in the playoffs versus just, hey, you win the pennant. That's it. There's only a World Series. There were no championship series and division series and wild cards and all the things we have now. Before we know it, 3/4 of the teams will make the playoffs. And Rangers won the World Series as a wild card team this year. So it's diluted it in a way that is good because it exposes it to more people. It's not as concentrated as it was in the pre-expansion era.
As much as I'm upset the Rangers won, I don't know if it's diluted. I think it shows a different way to play the game, and teams are built differently.
Yeah. No, it's diluted. The Western expansion started diluting it. It started taking away from the concentration of the fan base, players, teams, and started diluting it across the country in a good way. Again, it exposed a lot more people to hometown baseball. You had, Houston get a team, and teams in Texas and California, and now Colorado and Arizona and Seattle, places that didn't have baseball before. And then let's buy cards. And so again, it's diluted that focus.
I wonder if when distribution hit the West Coast, like at what point did Topps start? I don't know the answer to that. I'm sure somebody knows. Put it in the comments, please. Yeah, I'd be curious on when distribution went west because, for people who do, card finds and, search stuff out, you do hear the vast amount of finds are east to west, correct?
Sure.
Yeah. And I think that's for obvious reasons.
This is totally not what you wanted to talk about tonight, but here we go. Here we are.
Have I ever stayed on topic?
No, I love it.
Okay. Now, what I did want to talk about was I got posed a hypothetical question today.
Okay.
And the question is, if you won the lottery, and so you take away all reasonable speed bumps, all you have to do is take money, put it in the hobby, either into cards, into a company, VC, however you want to put it into the hobby for the greatest return on investment. How are you approaching the hobby?
Wow, it would definitely not be in a company. I think that there are, speaking of dilution, you've got all these companies chasing after what I believe to be a finite bubble of dollars within the hobby. And so all they're doing is robbing Peter to pay Paul. They're stealing from each other, essentially, market share, because there's just only so many dollars. This is a luxury item, not not a have-to thing. Cards are not, I don't need them to eat. I can't eat a piece of cardboard. Well, you could, probably wouldn't taste that good. But to me, a company would not be the way to go. I think you would be fighting a significantly uphill battle. To me, it would be, I think you could, honestly, I'd be buying raw vintage and I'd be grading it. I'd be buying nice raw vintage.
Almost like putting together a mutual fund.
Yeah, exactly. But if you said I had $100,000 or $1 million or some crazy astronomical amount of money, I'd be buying up really nice looking raw vintage and grading it. Because I think there is, especially on the, beyond collector grade, you have some opportunity to really get a nice return on your money.
What
you're going to miss.
What'd you say?
You have to absorb the misses too. You might think a card's an 8 and it comes back a 3, and you just, when you spin the wheel at SGC or PSA, you're putting it in their hands and it's their opinion. And so you have to be willing to miss, which is why you need a lot of money, because you're not going to hit every time.
Would you explain your vintage index?
The Vintage 100 Index
Yep.
was a thought that I had that a friend of mine, John Wade Boggs fan on YouTube, manifested into a reality of having some measurement of a basket of cards similar to the S&P 500 for stocks or whatever, and create a basket of cards that you just track to kind of know in some general sense how the vintage market is moving. And there are different services that try to do this.
Mm-hmm.
To what success, I don't know. How perfect is the idea that John and I came up with? Probably not, but it's something. And so we took 100 cards from the vintage era, so going up to from basically post-war to 1980. Topps Rickey Henderson is the last card in that index. And we just picked key cards, mainly rookies, Hall of Fame rookies. We wanted cards that had a lot of turnover, a lot of transactions to have good data. We use VCP prices to do it. Again, it's not perfect. We picked what we call a collector grade for each card. So a card from the 50s, we looked at a PSA 5 and we only looked at PSA, not SGC. We're not blending the two. We're not, it's not like we have unlimited time to gather data and it's already 23,000. What's that?
You have nothing else to do.
Yeah, exactly. So
how many years have you been doing this?
Well, we started it 3 years ago, and we had 5 years worth. We have 5 years worth of data now, because we were able to with a pretty high degree of certainty go back on VCP a couple of years and backfill some data that wasn't current, but it's all there. And so you just have to have the time and patience to muddle through it. And we take price points on a monthly basis. So that means we now have 60 data points to mainly look at trends, right? Is the market in general moving up, down, left, right, whatever. So it's telling a cool story. The farther we get along, I think the cooler story it's telling. And the quick answer to that is vintage has always been thought of as the slow burn. And so you'll have the idea that it's hard to lose on vintage. And I still believe that that's true over time, right? Anything can happen in any given 6 month period, or year period. But over time, we saw pre-COVID prices, and then we saw a huge spike as all of us experienced or saw in the COVID period, which it's funny because it actually happens around 2021. So a full year after, it's like the modern market got completely blown up. And then everybody goes, well, what's cheap now? Vintage. And so that started a vintage movement, a vintage rise through the early 4 or 5 months in 2021. Then you saw it. I would not use the word crater. Because it ended up leveling off twice as high as it was in 2018, for example, 2019. But it's been just
The
Just a
blip
fun
was
thing.
just so uncharacteristic.
Yeah,
That's really what it was. I mean, prices now are higher than they were 5 years ago. Is what you're saying? They're double.
100%. And it's literally and figuratively. I mean, yes, 100% correct. And yes, they're up 100%. And again, is every card? No. We're only doing 100 cards. It's not like I can tell you the entire vintage market, but it's just meant to gauge something. Let's start here and go from that, go with that.
So, with that theory in mind, and we're building our mutual fund, you said this is mostly Hall of Fame rookies. Is that where you would keep the money?
Uh, yes, you want to keep the money in the cards that are the easiest to move, the most liquid, and
Not the most rare.
correct, because
Interesting.
rarity is dangerous. It can be very profitable, but it's significantly more risky than, and vintage cards are not rare. Like 52 mantle is not rare. Go to a big show, you go to the National, you'll see literally hundreds and hundreds of them. It is not, vintage cards are not rare. What they are is liquid. And that means you can buy and sell them quickly. And whether at a profit or loss, you still want to be able to move a card quickly. You don't want to, hope that the right buyer's watching your auction or whatever for some super rare Ty Cobb card or something, which are very cool and can go for tremendous amounts of money. The timing has to be right versus traditional vintage rookies are always in demand.
Not baseball, but a card that I think people point or pin the market to a lot is the '86 Jordan rookie, and that just sold. 10 just sold for 377,000, I think, in the last week. So that's back up.
Yeah,
So I'm hoping that's a good sign. The high tide raises all ships, type of thing.
that's good to know. I have 6 of those right over
Right.
here.
I mean,
Who
who
doesn't?
knows?
I mean,
Right. But no, but I thought that was interesting. I think that's one of those cards that, for some reason, just everybody kind of uses that card almost as its own marker for the market.
and I think the 52 tops mantle is that card for baseball vintage world.
I think it is, but like you said, it's velocity. It's how many recorded sales are there,
Yep.
um, and there's a decent amount. Okay, so your recommendation, how many cards would you put in the portfolio? I mean, what's diversity to you in the card world? Is it 50 cards? Is it 100 cards?
Probably 250 ish.
Okay.
And I would spread it among sports as well.
Really?
There's a great set registry called the 250 greatest sports cards of the hobby. And you could probably get there if you included some other things. It's got pre-war stuff and some, I would call them obscure type cards, which are great. But again, if velocity matters, and I think it does, then you would want to have a range of prices. You don't want all $10,000 cards because that limits your pool of buyers, right? I think that lower end cards can rise quicker. If I had 10 cards at $30 that go to 60 and one at some higher price that goes up a commensurate amount, then I don't care. I'd rather have lots of littles. And I practice what I'm preaching here, not because I do it as an investment, but I only have so much money and I want to buy as many cards as I can. So to me, it's finding that sweet spot of price and grade, and have a lot of 20 and 40 and $50 bills in my collection, not huge dollar cards, but I have a lot of them. Volume matters. So
All right. Well, I mean, this is fascinating because when I was given the question, I got caught off guard, and I've done more thinking about it since I stumbled through the answer on the Zoom. I think there are spots in the hobby that there's good resources that you could invest in, but without a doubt, I actually think the pre-war, which you mentioned, and the diversification are the keys to the vintage, because vintage, like you said, is not invincible.
It's not invincible, but it's pretty solid. I would tell you this, if as I'm thinking through that question even further, if I had just stupid money that I was literally willing to throw away and not care, I would hire a bunch of programmers and start a company that had a universal set registry.
There we go.
That would be my dumb money, that because you would never make money on it. There's zero chance that you would actually make that profitable, because I don't think there are as many people. Maybe I'm wrong. I would like to. It'd be cool if I was wrong, but I don't think I am. Not there. There's a few thousand people that might use it, maybe even 10,000.
You and I agree on this too much for me to not think it's a great idea.
Well, being a great idea and being a profitable idea are two very different things.
True.
It would the coding it would take to build it, and that's the only reason it doesn't exist now, is it would be hundreds of thousands, if not $1 to $2 million to build it, to build the code, to do the searching and the pulling in of the data, the mining of the data, to put it in, to create this set registry from these multiple companies that don't really have the same type of interface and data layout. And I'm geeking out, but I'm just, because I've looked into this, like seriously looked into it enough where I got highly discouraged very quickly with the amount of money. And I'm like, yeah, no, I'm not going to do that. So,
well, you got me hooked on the PSA registries, and I would kill for the universal registry. My Kofax run is one card off from being all PSA, and it keeps me up at night. I mean,
again, I think SGC is talking about something along those lines. I can't wait to see what they unveil. We'll see.
And speaking of which, get my cards through SGC. It's been a week.
A whole week, huh?
I'm not spoiled, am I?
No.
I'm
a PSA guy. Good grief. A week would be a miracle. Wouldn't even know what. I'd think something was wrong.
Well, they do it by seasons.
Fair enough.
Yeah. All right, my friend. Thank you for jumping on.
That's it? We're done?
Time flies when we're having fun.
Man, all right. Good deal.
I mean, I'll stay all night, but the way you charge, I can't afford you.
Yeah. Checks in the mail, right?
Yeah, exactly. And you and I are going to be together in a week, I think next week again.
Doing Hobby Think Tank?
And Hobby Hotline this week.
Good. Really? Okay.
Yeah, with Dr.
I can't keep track between Golden Age of Cardboard, Chasing Cardboard, Bench Clear Media, Hobby Think Tank, Baseball Collector.
Professional humble brag.
I'm a professional something.
No. You're a professional good guy. Mike Moynihan, thank you.
Thank you, Danny. See you guys.
See ya.